All right, so yeah, thanks. Yeah, my name's Joe Hawking. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. It was pretty hard to figure out how to get upstairs actually once I got to the building because there was lots of stairs directing me down. But anyway, yeah, my name is Joe Hawking. This is my website. I've just pulled up here. I'm an programmer who works at a company called Synapse Games. It's here in Chicago. We make mobile games. It's not, I guess, at this point a startup anymore, but it's still not huge. I mean, there's like 20 of us or something. But anyway, but yeah, so we, besides making mobile games, though, we specifically use this technology called Unity, and so that's what I'm here to present about, is how to use Unity. So again, here's my website. Obviously, you can see there's the big image there about how I just wrote this book about how to use Unity. So at the end, we're going to raffle this off. It's called Unity in Action. It's pretty much for people who already know how to program but don't necessarily know anything at all about Unity or game development. This is, that's who I wrote it for. So anyway, I'll just get started though. So, this session is a little bigger crowd than I expected, actually, so that's a little intimidating, but that's okay. And a lot of programmers are interested in game development. I'm curious how many of you consider yourself programmers, even if not necessarily in your job, but just, you know how to program, and consider yourself good programmers. So awesome. A lot of people who program have this thought that they want to develop games, but they don't really know where to start. Fortunately, these days, there are lots of great options, and one great option is Unity. Here, let me pull up unity.com, actually, unity3d.com. So here's their website. The URL is a leftover from when Unity actually first started. It was specifically about 3D games. These days, actually, Unity is great for 2D games as well. For example, at my company, about half of our games are actually 2D games. The other half are 3D games, all mobile. But they're all developed in Unity, so there we go. So here, let me just show you a couple of these games for, like, this one's called Tyrant Unleashed. This is one of our games. You can see it's like a card game. Great, so that's Tyrant. I don't know, I might pull up one of our other games, just because this one's more 3D, so here, just move my computer over. So this one's called Global Assault, and this one, like I said, still developed in Unity, but this one's 3D. So anyway, so like I said, that's what I work on, games like that. So, all right. Unity. Actually, I'm also curious. How many of you have heard of Unity before? Oh, awesome. Most people, because yeah, definitely. When I say a lot of programmers want to get involved in game development, there are lots of different options. I also, in my free time, experiment a lot with like different HTML5 engines, stuff like that, because those are pretty cool. But Unity is great for a couple reasons. Probably the main reason is the fact that it's so great at multi-platform development. So we can just develop our game, once in the Unity's editor, and then just kind of deploy it to different platforms. Because, for example, our games, I was just showing it in the Play Store, so obviously it supports Android, but we also deploy our games to iOS, and some of our older games we also deploy to web, but we're kind of not paying attention to web anymore with our newer games. So, but again, Unity allows us to support all these different platforms from a single code base, so that's great. And so that, in my mind, is probably Unity's chief advantage, although that's definitely not the only good thing about Unity. Other great things, for example, like it just has a very well-designed API for programming in. So, you know what I mean? It's like when you program sometimes, like even before I look stuff up in the script reference, I can just take a guess at what the command is. And if I'm right most of the time, that's awesome. So Unity's kind of like that. But yeah, so yeah. I guess I'll just get started here. So, is there anything else actually I wanted to... No, okay, yeah, I'll just bring up Unity. So at this point, if you have Unity on your laptop, if you have a laptop available and you have Unity, I suppose you could follow along directly, but I'm not expecting that. So, I'm just kind of going to go through a demo now of building a simple little game, and then, just kind of, yeah. So anyway, so I launched Unity. Incidentally, my laptop here is a Mac, but another great thing about Unity, again, it's not just multi-platform in terms of the final deployment of the game, but it's multi-platform in terms of the Unity editor itself. I know at work, about half of us use Macs and like the other half use Windows, and we don't really care. So the only reason that matters at all is because, Apple requires that iOS apps be built on a Mac, but, whatever. Then the person doing the build has to be on a Mac, but, whatever. Anyway, so I start up Unity. It's the first screen, obviously. It's just got this, like, here are your recent projects, Joe. Do you want to open one of these? I'm going to start a new one, though, just to demonstrate with. So we'll just call this, Geekfest. And so let me change where it's saving to also. So great. All right, so once I do that, click Create Project, then Unity will just disappear for a second or two while they kind of do their magic behind the scenes, and then Unity will just open in this new project. Come on. Oh, whoops. I might have clicked off it by mistake. Yeah, oops, my bad. So, all right. So there we go. That's Unity. Incidentally, just real quick, I do want to point out, so here's where I saved the project. All it is a folder with, their files in it. You can move this to wherever you want or delete it or whatever. So it's just a folder. Anyway, so here I've got Unity now. What I've got installed on this computer, my laptop is the personal edition, but obviously at work we got like the pro edition. Feature-wise, personal and pro, I believe, are pretty much the same thing. The only difference is just licensing terms, On personal, you're just limited in terms of how much money your games can make, basically, is what it comes down to. But feature-wise, I believe they're exactly the same. And so personal edition is free to download off unity.com. So the pro costs a lot. Although relative to other game engines, not that much. But anyway, like, I don't know, I think 1,500. Yeah, so anyway. So yeah, so here let me just point out a few things in Unity real quick. So this is my default view. All of these views, by the way, are dockable. So, I could move it there if I really wanted to, but, I don't. And so I'm just going to restore the default layout. Blah, 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 blah. Here we go, layouts. So yeah, default. So anyway, so, again, all these little windows are dockable. I'm just going to point out a few, though. So this, of course, is the main scene view. This is where, I'm going to be laying out objects in the game, that kind of thing. And you'll notice there's a tab for game view. One really cool thing about Unity, actually, is, so the game view, this is the view of the game while it's running. One really cool thing, though, is while the game is running, you can still access the scene view. And a lot of us, for example, we have 2 monitor setups with the game on one monitor and the scene view in the other. So we can keep working on the game while it's running. That's really cool. So again, that's another smallish advantage Unity has over other tools. Like, I don't know of any other tools that can do that kind of thing. So yeah, that's pretty wild. Anyway, and then over here, this is just a text list. Hierarchy is just a text list of everything in the scene. Inspector, this is when I'm selecting objects, is going to show me information about the different objects. Down here, the project view, this shows all the different files that are in my project. They're going to be referred to as assets. That's kind of a standard thing in game development, to refer to files the games use as assets. So this includes, of course, all the art, but this also actually includes scripts, the code I write. Those files are going to show up down here. And then down here is also the console where I can see like error messages and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm going to get started now with, the first thing I'll do actually is a little sort of hello world kind of thing so that you guys just see that, and then, we'll kind of dress that up. So the first step here is I'm going to create a cube, which you'll notice there are some menus up top here. I went to the game object menu. There's also the assets menu, which also has create, but that's for like scripts and stuff. To create a cube, I go under game object, and boom, there we go. I created a cube, and it just shows up, in my scene view. Not complicated. Meanwhile, down here, I'm going to do create. Oh, by the way, this is the same as that assets create menu. I just right-clicked. It's whatever. But yeah, so I'm going to create a script. I'm going to be programming in C#. Incidentally, Unity supports actually multiple programming languages. C#'s probably the best one to use within Unity, just for a couple reasons, not the least of which being that it's the most industry standard in Unity's implementation. Whereas like their quote-unquote JavaScript is not JavaScript. It's like this kind of pseudo-JavaScript, and you avoid that. So anyway, so I'll just call this script hello world, and then I'll double-click it to open it up. Now, it's opening up in a separate application. It's opening up in Monodevelop, which if any of you are familiar with sort of open source tools surrounding C#. The Mono is this sort of open source version of .NET, and Monodevelop is that IDE. A lot of people, obviously on Mac, then like sort of Monodevelop is where it's at as far as IDEs. On Windows, a lot of people do wonder, can I use Visual Studio though? Because C#, and the answer is yes, you can. In the end, Unity doesn't care, because you don't actually run the code from your IDE anyway. The IDE is essentially treated by Unity as like a really fancy text editor, and you still have to hit run within Unity. So use whatever IDE you want. It doesn't matter. So anyway, so here we go. Let me just point out a few features of these script files. So first off, when you create a new script file within Unity, it pre-populates the script with this kind of template of what's going to happen. Obviously, if I didn't want the stuff in the template, I could just delete it and whatever. But so let me just point out what's going on in this template. First off, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. Command plus. No, I didn't do it.
In some IDEs, it's like that.
Oh wait, that one did it. Whatever I was hitting. So anyway, no, it was Command plus. So, yeah, I had to like shift it, but anyway, yeah. So yeah. So but anyway, so you can see here, just because I don't like that, but anyway, so you can see first off, if you've ever programmed in C# before, this is going to look pretty familiar. If you haven't, whatever, it's C# is very similar to like Java or any object-oriented languages like that. It's not hard to pick up. I know when I first started using Unity, I'd never programmed in C# before, but it didn't matter. I just picked it up. So anyway, these using commands at the top, these just sort of bring in certain frameworks. Actually, to this day, I have no idea why system collections is part of the default template in Unity, because I've literally never used any code from that framework. So I don't. But the Unity Engine framework, that then brings in all of the Unity API. So in this case, for example, the mono behaviors, objects, that's a Unity-specific thing. So, and I didn't actually notice until I started writing this book, it's spelled British style, but because I'd never actually spelled it. I'd always just had the template generate it for me. So, but yeah, because I had some reviewers asking, like, is it spelled correct? I'm like, oh yeah, it is. So, but yeah, so you can see we're inheriting from mono behavior here. What mono behavior does is Unity treats those kind of objects in a special way. Unity knows kind of what to do with them, special things to do. Again, while you're programming, you don't have to inherit from mono behavior, and certainly as your code base grows, in our case, our giant code base, not everything inherits from mono behavior. You don't have to do that, but certainly for Unity objects, you usually want that, and that's why it's part of the template. Mono behavior, among other things, it provides a number of methods which are just kind of automatically like Unity responds to them, and start and update are the two most important of those. They're not the only ones, but they're the two most important, which again is why they're part of this template. Start, as the name implies, when that object first loads, then start runs. It runs once, so whatever's in start just happens once. Update is called every frame that the object is in the scene. So or that script, as long as it's live in the scene, then update happens every frame. So if you guys are familiar at all with games, and I'm not even necessarily talking about game development, but having played them, you're probably familiar with the idea of like frames in terms of a game is like there's a bunch of things that happen, it draws a picture, then a bunch more happens, draws another picture, and that's how games run. So update latches into that kind of frame loop. So everything happens over and over. Anyway, so for this hello world little thing, I'm just gonna write debug log hello world and run that. So now, note that this script isn't actually in the scene yet. I just wrote it, but to actually put it in the scene, then what I'm going to do is click and drag it onto my cube. And so what happens now is if I click the cube, then this script, the hello world script, shows up in the properties of the cube. It's now what's called a component, because in Unity, objects are all comprised of components, is what happens. So actually, I didn't think to show before I attached the script, but without the script, this cube just had like the transform component, the cube component, box glider, mesh renderer. The only component that every object needs to have, so for example, if I create an empty one, the only component every single object is required to have is transform. And what that is, transform, if you're unfamiliar with that word, that's just a fancy mathematical word for like where the object is. And so every object needs to have like a location. But beyond that, everything is optional. So for example, this cube has these optional parameters for like defining the fact that it's a cube and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so I just added this hello world script. And so I'm just going to hit play, that button at the top there. And you can see the word or the phrase hello worlds appeared here in the console. So I'm just going to stop it. So again, that was just a real quick, as I said, what's in start there just runs once when the object first enters the scene, and that object, the cube, just, the scene starts up when I hit play. So there we go. This command obviously is part of, Unity's API. That just spits out a message to the console. So, all right. So at this point, then, I don't know. I guess I'll just get started with making objects move around and stuff like that. And pretty much what I'm just going to do is just as much time as I have, I'll just do gamey stuff in Unity. And then towards the end, like I said, we're going to raffle off a copy of my book and, we'll go from there. All right. So, so the first gamey sort of thing is I'm going to access an object called transform. So again, that word transform, it's very important. It's this mathematical term for an object's. There are actually three transforms. There's position, rotation, and scale. So every object has a position, rotation, and scale, and collectively, those are referred to as the transform for an object. Transforms are so important that Unity actually gives them their own special keyword. Every other component I have to access through a special command, but the transform, because every object has to have one, and it's very important, then they just kind of get their own special command. So anyway, I'm just writing transform, which incidentally, just like all object-oriented programming, I mean, this.transform, whatever. The this is optional. So transform, I'm just saying the transform of this object. So yeah. Transform dot, I don't know. Let's make this spin, this cube spin. So oops, not rotation, rotate rather. I believe I can do 0.1. Oops, not space. Damn you. 0.1, 0. So let's see if that works. Actually, I'm just kind of making it up off the top of my head. What's that? Yeah, and I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, that's a good question because it's kind of, again, if you haven't programmed in C# before, that might be weird looking. Oops, I touched something. So, but yeah, so spinning beach ball cubes. Yeah, I don't know what that's about, but anyway. So now, if I hit play, then you can see the cube very slowly spinning. It's very slowly spinning around. I should have made that not 0.1, so it's something faster. But anyway, but yeah, so there we go. And the cube is spinning around. So incidentally, that point you were asking, like, is the F supposed to be there? Basically, in C#, if you don't have the F there, then it'll treat it as a double. So in order for it to be a float, I have to actually specify this is a float, not a double. But it's kind of silly. But yeah, so you can see all that did then is that simply, remember, update, as I pointed out before, just gets called every frame. So all this is doing is every frame apply 0.1 to the rotation of the object. So that's all that's doing. Again, I probably should have made that faster, so whatever. But so there we go. Oops. And as I mentioned before, I can go back to the scene view and while the game is running, do stuff. And so that's pretty cool. I can see, for example, like the Y rotation of the object changing, and I could type in like different rotations if I wanted, just to see what happens and stuff like that, and then go back to the game. It's really neat. So, but there we go. So I got my spinny little cube there. So let's go from there. Let's see what else. What's the next thing? Oh, right. So I guess I should point this out. Is just the different keyboard commands for looking around the scene. Just obviously, to me, I kind of take them for granted because I've been doing it so long. But I should point that out. If I highly recommend having a 3-button mouse to use Unity, but if you don't have one available, then the controls are basically like Alt, and that'll tumble around the scene. Alt Control, that zooms into the scene, and Alt Command, that pans around. And then these are, again, just the scene view. This doesn't affect the game view at all. The game view is a totally separate thing. But this is so that I can look around, my level and be like, oh, so where's the object, and that kind of thing. So, and similarly, Unity does have, as I mentioned before, a 2D mode. But I'm only going to be looking at a 3D right now. But again, for doing 2D games, that's pretty awesome. So, and it's all seamless. It's all just within one sort of editor, one place. All right. What else do I have stuff to point out? Here, let me actually make a second object. So I'll just stretch this one out. Incidentally, these shortcut keys I'm using, WER, just refer to sort of moving the object around or scaling it. There are buttons for these things at the top. You can see I could, just tap the buttons directly, but again, I've gotten so used to WER, just whatever, because it's all my left hand and it's right there. So anyway, so I'm just gonna make this cube into like some sort of floor or something, and then let's throw another cube in the scene and move this one up, and there we go. So another cube in the scene. And actually, I don't want my script on this guy anymore. So there's a very small button here. It looks like a gear where I can just say remove component. So boom, that component is no longer attached to that object. And now I'll go back to my scene and put the component on this cube because I want it on this cube now. So there we go. Yay. Great stuff. Sure.
Different objects. Now, since you're basing it all off that same script that you have in the assets section, are you able to further manipulate it like for that specific cube? Like if you wanted one of those to rotate faster,
sure.
You need a second script.
That is a great question, actually. That is a great question, and the answer is yes, but I'd have to set it up that way. So I'm going to. Why don't we do that? I'll do that. So what Unity does is any field that's declared, by default public fields, but also other fields you can specifically say, what's called serialize it. So in other words, Unity now will expose that variable or that field in the editor, and then you can edit it, and it'll remember what edits you've done. So in this case, float speed, and I'll just default to 0.5f, but So then now we'll say, speed. So again, code-wise, hopefully there's nothing really weird going on here. I mean, it's just, there's a field at the top, and, I'm using that field. Within Unity, however, what you'll notice then is this object now, that one doesn't have, there we go. The script actually shows that field as now a parameter within that component. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it at 0.5, but let's, just for testing, add hello world back to this object. And we'll just switch this one to 3. So it spins really fast. And boom. You're going to see then, the script will just use the value that I assigned it within Unity. And that's actually a pretty annoying cause of bugs, though, because if I forget that, the number is different than what's in the code. Because, obviously, the code says it's 0.5, but it's actually 3. And it's
so does it place that script then in that object for you and then just adjust that speed?
I'm sorry?
So if you're adjusting the speed of the one that's the larger cube right now, we had that 3, does that mean okay, well, you eject that script and then so now that it has now you have 2 scripts that you can have to go back.
Oh, I see. So what's actually happening, what actually happens there is, again, it's very object-oriented in that sense. It's sort of the script file is essentially a class, and then Right. Then every time I link the script to an object, that basically becomes an instance of that class. So, yeah. So you could see, incidentally, while the game is running, I could go back to the scene editor now that this is a parameter of the component, and I can change the number while the game's running just to see what happens. That's pretty cool. So,
yeah. From this sort of standpoint, where is the value that you put in for the rotation for each of those? Is that recorded in a C# file somewhere, or is that just baked into?
Oh,
do you have access to
sure.
As code rather than?
So what you're asking, I think what you're asking. So the actual scene file itself, because I saved it. I happen to save it. So the scene now, there's this. I saved it as Hello World. So this Unity icon here, that's actually a scene file. So that. I can reload that later on, and that's where it stores the serialized values and stuff. Scene files themselves, they're a little confusing because people think they're anything special, but all they really are is just a snapshot of what was in the scene when you hit save. That's all they really are, so that later I can reload it.
Is that XML or something, or what is it?
There are a couple different serialization formats. It used to be binary only. Now it has a text serialization, which obviously is better for version control. Honestly, I haven't looked at them myself all that often.
So I think the heart of my question is the only way to modify that is to use this Unity.
Yeah. And that's where their different developers have different sort of tastes in terms of what values to expose and which ones not to. Because certainly for me, and fortunately my boss, we actually prefer not to expose lots of values because we really like whatever the number is in the code to be the number.
Yeah, just constrain any bugs.
Right, exactly. Because, exactly. We've had bugs where we were tearing our hair out all day, why isn't it doing the thing? And then we realized, it's somebody gave it a different value in Unity. Anyway, but yeah, so that's not fun. In our case, for example, it was like a URL. You can also obviously have a public variable that's just a string, and somebody changed the URL on us, and go, why would you do that? But anyway, so yeah, yeah. Although logically, we should never have exposed it in the first place. So, I mentioned incidentally, you can also take private values and serialize them as well. Private, I don't know. Let's do a cube. So cube object. Oh, wait. Game object, because cube is a component. But sorry. Cube, private cube. Now, obviously, it being declared as private, normally that means nothing outside this class has access to that object. But if I now do a special sort of compiler directives, serialize fields, then what will happen is that'll show up within Unity once it finishes compiling. There we go. That'll show up within Unity, but other scripts still don't have access to it, which is actually something we do a lot of because we want to be able to manipulate some things in the editor, but we don't want to accidentally manipulate those things in our code, so whatever.
So like if you're debugging something, you just want to
Right. I just point that out mostly, though, because a lot of tutorials you'll see, everything is just a public variable. So again, that's the only difference there. Either way works. The point is it's being exposed in Unity. So, so incidentally, with this, for example, I could now refer to the other cube. Then I could drag the other cube in here, and now the script can refer to the other cube in the scene. So I could say, cube, oops, well, I guess cube is not equal to null. Error check that, but anyway. Cube.transform, because every object has a transform. Before I was doing this.transform, now I can say cube.transform, and so we'll rotate that, and damn it, not rotation, rotate. I don't know, I'll rotate that on the different direction, so 5F, 0, 0, and watch what happens now, so boom. This is probably going to start looking really funky, yeah. So anyway, but yeah, so one script is controlling the other object.
So it doesn't completely override it, it just kind of adds on to that.
Yeah. So, there actually is this other parameter rotation where you can set absolute values for the rotation, say like go to this rotation. The rotate command is an increment. It adds to the rotation. But, whatever. Obviously, different things you want to do in different situations. So at that point, obviously this stuff, I haven't yet done anything with input. So I do want to do a little bit of input before my time runs out. So in this case, I'm just going to, instead of just doing speed, I'm going to do speed times some other value and input dot get axis. Oops, not get key, get axis. I could do get key too, but whatever. I want to vertical. Oops. And so now what's going to happen is, oh yeah. So it needs me to, oh, whoops, sorry. Not vertical, that's not the one I wanted. That refers to like a joystick, so anyway. Unity has built-in support for like joysticks and stuff, but I want mouse X, I believe. I think. Again, just making this up off the top of my head, so. No, it wasn't mouse X either. Damn it. What was it? Here. I just printed out some code I've written in the past to, refer to, what did I write? Well, actually, you know what? Even better, I'm just going to look this up online so that also you guys get a sense for, because if I just do Unity get axis, then probably the first link is going to be their script reference, and it's just going to say, Unity get axis. Oh, I need a space in there, that's why. So, anyway. But yeah, so that's just a really handy way to, just obviously look up different stuff. So, all right, let me try that. Okay, great. So now, when I'm not touching my mouse, nothing's happening because I put in that times the mouse X value. So when I'm not touching the mouse X is just, 0. But then while I, swipe back and forth on my touchpad here, it's just responding to the fact that, I'm swiping back and forth on my touchpad because that's creating different, mouse X values that the code is responding to. Obviously, then there's like a mouse Y for when the mouse is going up and down. And then you could also do axes like I mentioned, horizontal and vertical. Those are actually mapping to joysticks. And then meanwhile, this input API that Unity provides, it also has, or this input object, it also has like get keys, so I could get different keys on the keyboard, stuff like that. Yeah. So that's really cool. And you can see it's that easy then to make my code respond to, input. I just use that as a parameter into how fast is the object moving, that kind of thing. So, all right, so at this point, obviously there's a lot more that could go into making a game, but at this point, hopefully you guys have gotten a good intro into how to use Unity to make a game, but also I guess I'm kind of out of time because it's like 12:50, so yeah.
10 minutes of questions.
Yeah.
I wonder about the possibility of using this for something other than game development.
Sure.
For instance, engineering, manufacturing. How do capabilities here compare to something like AutoCAD or SolidWorks?
Sure. Well, first off, one important thing to clarify is the distinction between Unity and like a CAD tool or something, because so Unity is it's the environment where sort of like the assets you've created come together into a game. But Unity, for the most part, you don't create assets within Unity. You can see, for example, my script. Like, yeah, I created a script file in Unity, but I still have to type it in a separate IDE. Similarly, some sort of like 3D model you would create in a separate tool and import it into Unity. So, yeah, Unity has a few basic primitives like cube, sphere, stuff like that. But anything, again, those are just kind of these default primitive shapes that Unity, comes with. Anything more complicated than that, you would actually create in an external tool and import it.
So like a person, for example, like using Maya or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Maya, you mentioned that's a great tool. Blender is a great tool for that kind of stuff too. 3 Studio Max. But again, those are like sort of animation tools geared more towards entertainment, like movies, games, that kind of thing. That said, though, Unity actually is used a lot for non-game applications. A lot is a relative term. I mean, it's definitely used mostly for games. That's what it was designed for. But it does get used for non-game purposes as well. I know before actually I started making games, I was involved a lot in, for example, creating like multimedia art. Not necessarily games, but definitely still entertainment. And I was using tools like Unity. Unity didn't exist yet back then, but using tools like Unity. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for really heavy-duty engineering work, just because, again, it's not geared towards being super accurate. Which for example, there's a great anecdote. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but it involved way back when, you remember like this game Battlezone? It was like an Atari game, and it was like the first-person game, which meant it was a long time ago. But the Army, when they saw that, they're like, whoa, we were spending millions making tank simulators, and these hippies at Atari just, banged it out. And then so they brought him in and sort of asked him all these hard questions, and the guys from Atari, pretty much every question was like, it's a quarter, So, yeah. The Army guys kind of, at the end of the meeting, decided, yeah, we're going to keep making our own simulators. And, yeah, yeah.
Can you describe your workflow somewhat with regard to what of this is like a programmer's job versus maybe a designer's
Sure.
job?
I mean, well, it varies a lot, of course, by the individual studio, the company making the games. And it frankly has evolved for us as our studio has grown. When we first started working on, Tyrant, for example, that was our first mobile game using Unity. When we first started working on Tyrant, there was I think 6 people total in the company, and then now there's 30. So obviously our workflow is going to change over time. Among other things, we have tried as much as possible to actually separate the art content from the programming, because Unity one not so great thing about Unity, depending on your perspective, is it encourages you to be a little promiscuous in making the art and the code, kind of all. Well, for example, that problem we already looked at about how you can change the numbers in the editor. It's like the fact that Unity encourages you to do that is kind of dangerous, and So yeah, I mean, there's that kind of thing. So overall, our workflow has evolved over time. Among other things, now our artists have Unity installed. When we first started, they didn't. They just handed their assets off to me, and then I put them into Unity. So, whereas now it's much more of I'm just looking at code, and the artists put their art into Unity. So, yeah.
Wait, so you're saying personal licenses, right? That's like a free license that you just have to say, hey, this is powered by Unity kind of thing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Essentially?
Yep.
And if you start making actually big money on it, then it's like, well, then you need to contact them.
Yeah. It used to be, incidentally, prior to very recently, there were substantive differences between the personal and professional editions, but last GDC, which was, I think, March, Unity just kind of changed that. They're like, okay, the free edition has everything, it has different licensing, that's all. So, yeah. Whereas it used to be the case that you actually needed, our company, we needed the Pro edition in order to get access to certain features, but that was the past. So, yeah. Sure. Well, so that again, it does depend some on the studio and the game. For example, in our company, given that our games all actually run online, we have front-end and back-end engineers. So everybody working in Unity, such as, say, me, we're front-end engineers because the app that actually goes on people's phones, their Android phones, their iPhones, whatever, that's developed in Unity. However, everything the game is doing is actually still calling, HTTP requests out to our server, which then our backend engineers are developing, and our servers actually are mostly PHP with Scala for the combat engines. Yeah. So the one answer to that question is it depends a lot on the game, depends a lot on the company. I will say in general, for people working on programmers working in games, the main difference really is much more knowledge about and or interest in the graphics. Typically programmers in other kinds of environments, they don't think a lot about graphics or just plain reject thinking about graphics, whereas when you're working on a game, that's a very central part of working as a programmer, is thinking about what are the players seeing and that kind of thing. Yeah.
What's the typical percentage of contribution by programmers to the whole game?
That actually, that there again is the only honest answer to that is it depends on the game. I will say there's a general trend, but this is like a rule of thumb. This definitely is it depends on the game. But the bigger the game, the more artists it needs. In general, what tends to happen is the number of engineers you need doesn't really go up, but the number of artists you need does go up a lot as the game gets bigger. But since, for example, our games are really small, we have way more engineers than artists, and so it depends on the game. Yeah.
Have you worked with Swift at all? And do you compare it all to Unity?
I have not worked with Swift.
The render, how fast is render?
Sure. Not, yeah.
It's getting into it, it's I could, dive into Swift, but then it's strictly, Apple kind of geared product.
That's definitely the main reason I'm not so keen on that is because, like you said, it's very much restricted to just these kind of devices. So, yeah.
What's the story look like for cross-platform dev? Obviously this could runs great on a computer with a mouse, but it's going to fall apart.
So certainly this little simple scene I showed you actually is going to run fine on any platform Unity supports, but that's because this was very simple.
There's some sort of pattern for dealing with different ways of getting input?
I mean, there are third-party solutions for example, in my company, we use a third-party solution. It's called Finger Gestures, whatever. It's this third-party company that basically just created an API so that we don't actually have to say whether or not this input is coming from a mouse or a swipe or whatever. We just say, movement to the right and, responding to that.
As soon as you get a amount of plug into the third party
Oh yeah. There.
Create software too.
That is one huge thing in Unity is there's a ton of like third-party add-ons and stuff like that. So yeah. Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So thanks. Hopefully this was informative. So again, I wrote this book, Unity in Action. If you found what I was talking about interesting and want to keep learning more about Unity, then
Promo codes?
I highly recommend. No, I don't. I highly recommend picking up Unity in Action. So anyway, we're gonna just have a drawing for one free copy. This one right here. So. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.